USPAP, page 254. Appraisal development and scope of work issues. Number 151. What is scope of work? Question. What is scope of work? Response. In basic terms, the scope of work is the work an appraiser performs to develop assignment results. USPAP defines scope of work as the type and extent of research and analysis in an appraisal or appraisal review assignment. Note that this definition does not include reporting. Number 152. Applicability of scope of work rule. Question. In my role as an appraiser, I perform many assignments that are not appraisal or appraisal review. Does the scope of work rule apply to these assignments? Response. No. The scope of work rule applies only to appraisal and appraisal review assignments. Assignments other than appraisal and appraisal review, for example, teaching appraisal courses, providing sales data, collecting market data, analyzing reproduction costs, developing educational texts, still require an appraiser to comply with those portions of USPAP that apply to appraisal practice. The portions of USPAP that apply generally to appraisal practice include the preamble, the definitions, the ethics rule, the competency rule, and the jurisdictional exemption rule. Number 153. Responsibility for the scope of work decision. Question. Who determines the scope of work? Response. It is the appraiser's responsibility to determine and perform the appropriate scope of work. Number 154. Client specifies scope of work. Question. Is a scope of work specified by the client acceptable? Response. The scope of work specified by the client is acceptable only if it allows the appraiser to develop credible assignment results. If the scope of work specified by the client does not permit development of credible assignment results, the appraiser must either change the scope of work to what he or she determines is necessary to develop credible assignment results, or withdraw from the assignment. Number 155. Alternative valuation products. Question. I am a state certified appraiser, and as such, perform real property appraisals in compliance with USPAP. However, I have recently been asked by a client to provide them with an alternative valuation product that they have designed. This product, as designed, does not appear to comply with USPAP. am I allowed to perform such an assignment as an appraiser? Response. First, it is important to understand that appraisers, not report forms, must comply with USPAP. If you are able to perform an acceptable scope of work and make modifications and or additions to the report that would result in USPAP compliance, then you may perform such an assignment as an appraiser. Otherwise, you must decline or withdraw from the assignment. Page 255. Appraisal development and scope of work issues. Number 156. Client request to limit scope of work to new client name. Question. An appraiser completed an appraisal for client A. Client B received a copy of the appraisal from client A and finds it acceptable for their purposes, but wants to be identified as the client in the appraisal report. Client B is aware that appraisers are prohibited from readdressing or transferring a completed report to a different client's name. As a result, client B would like to engage the appraiser in a new assignment, limiting the appraiser's scope of work to only, that's underlined, identifying them as the new client. Can the appraiser complete the assignment from client B under these terms? Response: no. USPAP requires the scope of work performed to produce credible assignment results. USPAP clearly establishes that the scope of work is determined by the appraiser. If a client's instructions, for instance, assignment conditions, limit the appraiser's scope of work in a new assignment to simply identifying a new client, the client, not the appraiser, has made the scope of work decision. In addition, even if the appraiser accepted the client's proposed scope of work as his or her own, the scope of work may not be adequate to produce credible assignment results as required by USPAP. As is the case with all assignments, when a client's assignment conditions are too restrictive to produce credible assignment results, an appraiser must decline or withdraw from an assignment unless the appraiser can modify those assignment conditions to allow for credible assignment results. Number 157. The impact of different clients on assignment results with otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work. Question. Assuming otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will an appraiser's value opinion for an assignment be the same regardless of the appraiser's client? Examples. Assuming otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will an appraiser's value opinion for an eminent domain assignment be the same regardless of whether the assignment is for the condemnee or the condemnor. In a litigation assignment with otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will the appraiser's value opinion be the same regardless of whether the appraiser was hired by the defendant or the plaintiff or a third party? In an appraisal prepared for a tax assessment appeal with otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will the appraiser's value opinion be the same regardless of whether the appraiser was hired by the government or the taxpayer? In an appraisal prepared for a gift donation for tax filing purposes with otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will the appraiser's value opinion be the same regardless of whether the appraiser was hired by the IRS or the taxpayer? Assuming otherwise identical assignment elements and scope of work, will an appraiser's value opinion be the same independent of the client and other intended users? Response: before answering these questions, we first need to review portions of the scope of work rule. In any appraisal or appraisal review assignment, the appraiser must identify the problem to be solved, then determine and perform the scope of work necessary to develop credible assignment results in the context of the intended use. Appraisers have broad flexibility and significant responsibility in determining the appropriate scope of work for an assignment. It is